G'day, mate, and welcome to Restless.
I think it was two different accents.
I'm not even
in
sure
one
what that
sentence.
was.
Australian and Italian, perhaps?
Yeah.
Some sort of.
Coming to you live out of Stamford, Connecticut, because if we were dead in Stamford, Connecticut, we wouldn't be coming to you. So here we are on Restless. We are restlessly seeking the face of God and not getting enough sleep, clearly.
And you've joined Diane,
And you've
Lauren, and Father Joseph Gill, priest of the Diocese of Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Indeed, and we are here, and we're talking about advice that we've received, some of the greatest advice we've ever received, and some of the worst advice we've ever received, because we've all probably heard it, especially as a young person, maybe growing up as a teen or in your college years. Our elders will often say, "Hey, Sonny," because that's how my grandparents spoke all the time.
They sound ancient.
Well, honestly, I think all my grandparents died in their 70s, but when I was 12, they were ancient. Mm-hmm. I was like, oof. And now that I'm 37,
That was a long time ago, too.
70s.
So, yeah.
It was, the 90s, right? That was a long time ago. So what are some of the pieces of advice you've received that may have changed your life or shook you up, or I don't know. What are your thoughts? All three of them, by the way, said they had not prepared for this episode. So we'll find out what gems they come out with.
This is one where, read the topic and it's like, what is the greatest piece of advice I've ever received? I mean, I've been getting advice my entire life, right? Like aging, getting older, you were constantly being taught, guided, corrected on your behavior, right? As a kid, to be more polite or be a little bit more bold. Don't be so shy. Try a little bit harder. I mean, man, now I'm just thinking back to, getting in the car with my dad after a basketball game and I knew I didn't do well, like as a middle schooler, and he'd be like, "So Lauren," and I'd be like, "Don't start. I know," So yeah, that happens, through all of life. But, I'm someone that's, I think, constantly learning and trying to be better. So I do appreciate advice. Again, I can't really remember much of it, but what did come to mind for this, because it's more recent, was just one of the talks from my retreat in Spain, March of 2020, which was live for eternity. So that did really change my view of things, to not be so caught up in the day-to-day stuff, right? Because it's so easy to get frustrated when things don't go your way, or, people can just be irritating, putting a lot of effort into something. And then, I don't know, for me, it's like a lot of relationship things that tend to frustrate me. Like people asking me, what day is it? What time is it? When I've already emailed them, I've already done everything. And they just need to read my email. And so it's like, just respond to the text, but to not be so frustrated and caught up in things that do not matter, right? Because our goal is to go to heaven, be with God forever and ever. So to live for eternity and have that as your constant, forward-looking desire and goal.
Good. That's good.
I came up with a couple pieces of advice I could remember receiving or hearing someone else say. One I thought was good. This was a couple years ago. I was with a lot of seminarians from the diocese, and two seminarians were discussing one was actually really complaining about the fact that our song for that day wasn't in Latin. And they're sort of bickering about this, and the first seminarian finally said, well, Latin is the preferred language of Holy Mother Church. Without missing a beat, a nearby priest turned to him and said, "Don't be more Catholic than the Church." I thought that was a great line, "Don't be more Catholic than the Church," because it's a real temptation to be like, well, this is how it has to be, and this is what the Catechism says. But what actually matters is that you're preaching the gospel and not trying to be so officious and, button down, that you're more trying to sort of flex your orthodoxy on people. So that was one that I took to heart.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah, so I'm a self-proclaimed nerd, and so I would say 50% of the photos on my phone are just, screenshots of spiritual books and things I'm reading and quotes from the saints. But there are there were a lot that I scrolled through to prepare the 5 minutes before this episode. But one that there are some themes, common themes. So I'll read one. One of my favorite saints is Saint Jose Maria Escriva, and he's very easy to read. Opus Dei, how do you glorify God in your everyday work life and holiness and everything. So he, I'll just read this. Now that I'm confiding in you as a friend, as a priest, and as a father, I would like to remind you that in every circumstance of our lives, we are, by God's mercy, children of our Almighty Father who is in heaven, but who also dwells in the intimacy of our hearts. I would like to engrave upon your minds the conviction that since your Father well knows what you need, we have every reason to be optimistic on our journey through this life, with our souls completely detached from those earthly things that seem so very necessary. God will provide. Believe me, this is the only way to be lords of creation and to avoid the pitiful slavery into which so many people fall because they forget that they are children of God and spend their time worrying about tomorrow or a future that they may never see. So for me, this is like just a theme of my spiritual life and life in general because I am a perfectionist. I like to control things. I try to be the lord of my own life. And ultimately it comes down to just forgetting that I am a child of God, that I'm holy, chosen, and loved by him, and that really all of this time that I spend worrying about, things that may never happen, or just, just kind of the way that I would like things to play out. It's it's ultimately like a lack of trust in this good God who really knows all of my desires and knows what I need for my salvation. And so yeah, it's a reminder just to kind of be detached from everything that we think that we need because God knows, and there's something really if you kind of pray about that, there's something super joyful in knowing that you don't have to construct all of these sort of things that you think that you need and work out a path of however I'm going to achieve X, Y, and Z because. Yeah, ultimately it's God who's moving first in our life. So I like that quote.
Amen. Amen.
One more piece of advice that I received a couple years ago that actually really did change how I looked at my day and how I structured my life. I was so when I went to college at Marist, and they did this busy person's retreat. So rather than having to give up a weekend, you could go for half an hour with somebody, and so you're sort of supposed to do these readings in advance, and you'd meet with this person for half an hour a day for the week. And I didn't think I had enough time to do this, but I signed up for it, and I blew past all the readings and completely was the terrible participant and didn't do any of the things I was supposed to do. But I went to the meeting with the person, and I got assigned a man by the name of Sean Salmon, who's a Marist brother. He actually was their superior general for a period of time. He's a really smart guy, really good guy. And I would always structure my day so that everything started and ended at the same time. So it was never any time to travel. So I'd always be sort of flustered and running late to things or whatever. So I busted into his house probably 3 minutes late and was sort of getting up, erupting from my chair to leave quickly to get to my next thing. And he said, "Joe, you need to slow down and give yourself time in your day." And it kind of struck me that he was right, that I wasn't fully participating in anything I was actually doing because I was always worried about, okay, I'm late, but it's okay. And now I have to be the next place. I don't want to be late to there, so I need to get going. So we need to finish this. We need to wrap it up. And being present and structuring my day to be present. So not just mentally saying I'm going to be present, but saying, okay, the meeting at 2:15, it has to be at 2:30 because I'm 10 minutes away at 2:15. At 2:15, and not packing things so tightly together that I then just can't catch my breath throughout my day. So that has changed the way I look at my day and has made me a more relaxed person. Therefore, I think a more effective person. The things I try to do.
Nice. For me, one I'll never forget is I used to go on these retreats. I think I may have mentioned this name of this place before, but I'm still embarrassed to talk about it. Catholic Family
I was going to
Land.
say
I was going to say it.
Knew
too.
it.
Yeah, Catholic Family Land. Yeah. And they were great. And one of the things they did was adoration for the teens on one of the last nights, and all of our parents wrote letters to us, and it was very moving. It was really nice. And one thing that my dad wrote in the letter that I've often used and has always stuck with me is he said, "Discouragement is from the devil." I always thought that was great. Discouragement is from the devil. It's never from the Holy Spirit. It's never from God. And anytime you feel discouraged, you can immediately know that's the evil one working on you. And that has gotten me through a lot, because there's times you're in spiritual life, you're like, I just sinned again. I'm still struggling with this. But you know what? That discouragement is not from God. It's from the devil. So I never forgot that. I thought that was pretty good. Now, if you could go back and give your younger self some advice, what would you say about anything? About work, relationships, dating, school, your spiritual life, anything? What would you say to your younger self? What did your younger self need to hear and maybe didn't hear?
I needed to hear something along the lines of, people will not remember this, the way that you think they will, because I would scrutinize over things. I can't raise my hand in class unless I have my answer perfectly crafted in my head so I don't pause or stumble on my word. Like I was so timid and shy and afraid to like stumble in any kind of a way that it really held me back. I think I shared this before, but one example was doing the 8th grade play in middle school. There was a singing part that you can learn, which I did learn. Like we rented the CD from the library and I practiced it, and I can sing and I could sing it well. But I was so shy and, terrified. And then we got to the audition and the director said, you don't have to sing that part to audition if you don't want to. And that was such a relief. So I didn't do it. And then I got some, I'm in the choir kind of a role. It was Oliver, just part of the cast and singing with everybody. And then I remember in the dress rehearsal sitting in the back of the auditorium and listening to people with these little lines that they got to sing on their own. And it was like, I could sing just as well as them, right? But actually I'm like a really talented singer. So like I probably would have gotten like a much bigger role, but I held myself back like in so many ways. And then I finally had that like, yeah, I scrutinize over everything and I think everyone's going to remember, but people like instantly forget, and half of the people aren't even paying attention to you to begin with. So why are you even scrutinizing over it,
Yeah, but middle school, everyone thinks that they're the center of the world.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we all
But some people I think are more
subconsciously.
free than others, like willing to take risks, okay with making a mistake, right?
Yeah, some are. Some are.
Trying out for the team. I don't know, whatever. I mean, I held myself back in sports too. Like, oh, I'm not supposed to look better than the senior, so I'm not going to try as hard. And it was like a one-on-one basketball like bracket competition within our practice, and I got all the way to the last round, which like I surprised myself because I was always timid and shy and like holding myself back. And then it's like, oh well, Sarah's supposed to win. But no, Sarah was not supposed to win. Like I was supposed to try the hardest that I could try.
Did Sarah win?
Yeah.
You kind of let her win a little
yes. I didn't try my hardest, but I was like in a total groove, like in all the previous games, like making all these shots. So I don't know, but yeah, it's like just I would hold myself back like in all these ways. So it really helped me to like get over fear and put myself out there a little bit more.
That's good advice. Yeah.
And I still tell it to people today because, I mean, it's a common thing that people are like afraid of public speaking or doing something where like a room will be on them. And I say it all the time. Well, what I do say is no one cares. And then people are like, well, people care. Like, all right, well, that's not what I mean. But they are not going to remember, like every little thing that you just did the way you think they will.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
One thing that I sort of took as a motto eventually that I realized is I always say, it's not who's best, it's who's last. So I learned this from when I used to do martial arts. I did it for a long time, and I was truly awful at it. And I taught martial arts too. So like if I was my student, I would have been complaining about myself constantly to whoever would listen. Like I was not very dedicated and I was not coordinated at all, which is why I was doing martial arts. And so and I would get frustrated because all these people would come who had just such great natural gifts and were naturally coordinated, were taller than me, were stronger than me. Even as I got to advanced ranks, even when I got my black belt, I was of 6 black belts. I wasn't the worst, but I was not the best by any stretch. But it turns out that when all the people with natural talent quit, you're the best one left standing. And it's not always about being good at it at the beginning or being naturally good at it, because I've seen plenty of kids who had natural talent and got bored and quit. And it's not just martial arts, it applies to all kinds of things. Like don't be discouraged when you're not immediately good at something, because it's who sticks it out the longest who will ultimately be good at it. So that's I wish I'd figured that out sooner, but I tell to whoever will listen now.
That's great advice for the spiritual life.
Yeah.
Because I've met many people that have started very strongly and then have fallen off. And you think like this person's going to be a saint. Like they're on their path. This is great. And then you're like, wait, what? Why did they stop following Christ 2 years later?
Yeah, and ultimately, if you have to struggle to get something, it just means all the more. And you remember being the person who was bad at it, and when you see that in others, it makes you a better person, a better mentor to them. I think so. I think all around, it's better to not be first sometimes.
So now, because you used to teach martial arts,
Yeah.
like, did you see those kids that reminded you of you?
Oh yeah. And I would tell them sometimes, because by the time I was teaching, I was the last. I mean, I was the oldest kid teaching. I was the highest ranked there, and I was pretty good at it. And so I think they didn't know me when I was bad at it. So I think they assumed like, oh, well, Joe's that's different. And they saw their classmates who were naturally good. And I would always say, no, listen, I was worse than you. Like, how you can walk across the room and not break a bone? Like that was a learning curve for me. So like, don't be discouraged. And also if you quit, that's you giving up. Right. And so then this kid who's better than you does win. So they didn't have to work for it at all. Work for it, and then you'll realize in the end that it's not, again, it's who's left standing. I was the best black belt for my class because they all quit and didn't get any better. They got the black belts, and that was the end of it. I wanted more, and so I got better that way. I think, like you said, spiritual life is much the same way.
That's awesome. Did you actually break a bone in martial arts?
Yeah, do you want to hear the story? It's just,
Yes, I do.
So there's this sweep we used to do called a puder kapala, where you basically you lift up someone's arm and throw their head underneath it, so your whole body does like a full 360.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, in theory, but
Cool.
this kid did it to me. And in the middle of our school, we had these two mats that weren't quite touching. There's a little bit of a gap, and as he threw me for the throw, my little toe got caught between the mats.
Ooh.
So my toe stood, but the world turned, as you might say. And I didn't notice it at first until I looked down and my foot was just like blown up like a balloon. I'm not sure if it was broken or not, but I was in so much pain. And I also was like a brown belt, and I had to then go teach a Little Dragons, or I held out a Little Dragons class. So I was like shaking and like red and like all puffy eyed. And I was like, great, like, so it ended up not being my worst injury by far, but it was my only serious martial arts injury, which I'm happy for.
Oh.
That was the purpose of martial arts, to get me to stop getting hurt all the time. So that worked, as it turns out, eventually. It took something like 6 years, but
Oh, gosh. Wow,
Yeah.
that sounds pretty painful.
yeah, whatever.
Oh, man.
I think what you're really talking about is growth, right? And I don't know. I remember growing up hearing other kids, it's like they would quit this or that, whether it was dance or a team, right? That's so common. Like, oh, the kid quit. And then like you ask the mom, oh, well, he didn't like it. It's like, well, did he not like it? Or was he just not like the best kid there to begin with? And like, why not be challenged? You have to grow, and because growth is just improvement, right?
I used to tell parents all the time, like, your kid doesn't want to be here. I don't want to be here for any continuous 2-week period until I got my black belt, and then didn't want to be here again. Like, that's not the point. Like, stick it out. I'd say, again, same thing with spiritual life. It's like, oh, you don't want to pray? Okay, well, then just don't, I guess, right? Like, you're not going to grow in spiritual life if you only pray when you want to,
Exactly. That's funny though, because I'm just reminding myself of the first time I ever joined a soccer team. I was in like kindergarten or first grade, and my mom took me to the first soccer practice, and I remember I have this memory very clearly. I was like, running like crazy, and then like halfway through the practice, I said to the coach, I needed to stop. He's like, okay, just go take a break. I said, no, I need to stop playing soccer, period. And I walked off the field and I never went back. And to this day, soccer is not my thing. I played baseball where you get to stand around and not run.
If it wasn't for you, it wasn't for you,
Definitely not for me.
Yeah, I did swim team one summer at our swimming and tennis club, Roxbury. Diane and I both went to. Swimming is so not my thing. I didn't like it at all. It is so boring to me, but I don't like anything really that doesn't have a ball, or some kind of competition to it. But I did stick out that summer, to not quit. And I remember as like a third grader or something being like, wow, I am toned, But when it came to the meets, I would get so nervous and scared. I just would choke on the water, and like I couldn't even finish like the lap. And then I remember this, the swim director coming over like, yeah, keep your mouth closed,
That's
but
good advice
I
to
just
receive,
was
too.
not.
Keep your mouth closed when
While
underwater.
Please keep
swimming.
breathing.
Yeah.
Good advice. What about you, Diane? What would you say to your younger self?
I mean, I was a perfectionist, so I would just say you don't have to be perfect, because that it really was a burden that I carried when I was younger. I just always I had to get like the top grade, and to the point where I didn't. And I'm not saying that life is all about go and you do you and have so much fun and whatever, but you should be able to enjoy, the present moment. So also just be present to the present moment, as opposed to always thinking ahead about, I'd just be planning in my head of when do I have the next thing that I have to, focus on, and kind of just missing the excitement of today. So I think that's really important, because like Lauren said too, it's I don't know, now I try to look at things of is this going to matter in a month, 2 months,
Yeah.
At the time it just seemed and even through early 20s, I was just added so much, or made things to be so much more important than they actually were, and totally had my priorities messed up. It was all about this temporal stuff and spiritual life, whatever, so yeah, it was just messed up priorities. And so I think just anything that becomes disordered, I mean, you do end up becoming not miserable, but or you can be miserable.
Oh, sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's just yeah, it's not good.
So, all of this advice, sometimes it's easy to take advice, and sometimes probably for most of the time, at least for me, it's hard to take advice. You hear it and you kind of bristle and you're like, wait a second, I don't want to hear from you. Maybe it's the person, maybe it's the topic. So, but counseling the doubtful is actually one of the spiritual works of mercy, is giving advice to someone, helping them to grow. How can we give advice so that it's well received?
That is a tough one. Well, as I've been learning, you can't just hit people with the truth. That's really my default, because I'm like, it's the truth, just accept it. But you've got to start wherever the person is at. So in a lot of cases, I don't think you can even bring God in, but you can maybe bring in some of the values, or you got to lead people,
Yeah.
and listen to them.
A friend of mine talks about compliment sandwiches, where you have a compliment, then the advice, and then another compliment.
Yeah.
So that they feel very complimented and you still get the advice in there.
Well, I think too, a lot of it, when you're trying to give advice to people, you definitely want to form some sort of relationship, and a relationship of trust, so that the person knows that you care about them and you love them, and that like any sort of advice that you're giving is coming from a place of like, I'm willing you're good. I'm wanting what's good for you. I think another helpful thing is to kind of like, provide some personal stories of, making me like, maybe say something like, well, in my experience in my life, just so that you make it sound like it's not necessarily directed to them. But obviously talking about topics that are pertinent. Something that I've been praying about and thinking about lately, because a lot of my friends do come to me for, personal and spiritual advice and things like that. And fraternal correction, like, how do you do that? How do you do that well? That's definitely something that, I don't know, maybe Father Joseph, you have some advice for me about how to give that, because it's definitely something that I struggle with, of like, well, you don't want to rupture a relationship such that, there's no possibility of future sort of dialogue. But at the same time, we have an obligation to, like Lauren said, to speak the truth. And, like I just wonder, like, at my particular judgment, am I, I just don't want to have Jesus be like, well, you had all these opportunities to say something and you didn't, and I have to believe that God plants us and in people's lives. He sends people to us and us to them, maybe for a reason. And maybe that reason is to, to open our hearts to Christ. But I just don't, in terms of the particulars, the time, the place to do that, how to do it well, I struggle.
I remember when I was a teen, I asked a priest about, all of my friends would be taking God's name in vain. And it really bothered me, because I never did that, and I found it really abrasive. And I was like, well, how do I correct them? And he said, use humor. Yeah. So like if someone was like, oh, my God, be like, oh, glad to hear you praying finally.
I like that.
Or something like that. Just kind of.
Yeah, I feel like when you are giving advice to somebody, it's very vulnerable for them, and it can be very awkward to listen to someone correct you on something that you probably thought you were doing well. And so I think anything you can do to make them feel more comfortable, and humor is one of those things, or even like knowing the right venue. So like not in front of a bunch of people, right? Like, or not in front, like not in front of the person whom they aggrieved. That's the situation, or something like that. Like knowing how to, like, being aware and sensitive to the fact that like this is very uncomfortable for them, and not like just calling them out in front of a bunch of people, or just like smacking them with the truth. And then like, humor can totally be a great thing. It makes someone laugh. They forget they're mad at you, right? So,
right. Yeah, you can get a point across that way, definitely. But and I like what you said, Diane, about kind of sharing your own personal journey. Yeah, because that's one of the things that drives me a little crazy, is when people give advice and they're not taking their own advice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you want to be real, and I think that, like, in my own experience, my friends have opened up to me because I've been real with them about my struggles, of like, like making it very apparent that I am nowhere near perfect, and that I don't have all these things figured out. I still don't, and I probably never will. But like, to still kind of, to be vulnerable, I guess, because none of us are perfect.
So, go ahead.
So I was going to say that, and that has the added benefit of, I mean, if someone is giving you advice, I at least take it a lot more seriously if they say, listen, I've had to struggle through this. I'm trying to save you figuring it out as I did. Like, if you say to somebody, look, this is something I've struggled with, and I'm trying to save you the time to figure it out yourself. Like, this is my situation. I'm sharing through my life, right? Like, don't make the same mistake I did. That, I think, can be really, really powerful, but it only comes from being willing to be vulnerable and share your own shortcomings, which is really tough.
Yeah, it can be. It can be. So have you ever received like terrible advice? I've received plenty of terrible advice.
I don't think I would.
Something you can think of to share?
Oh yeah, definitely from many priests.
Uh-oh.
You know, like I'll never forget in when I was about 19 years old, I was a seminarian. I joined right out of high school, and so I was in college, and I would have these summer assignments. And I remember at one summer assignment, the priest on the first day, he's like, "Would you like a beer?" I'm like, "I'm 19." He's like, "Just never forget, there's no drinking age in a rectory." And I was like, "Oh no, that's not good. That's not good."
Oh, man.
God rest his soul.
That's funny.
He's no longer with us, but
I'm sure that I've received plenty of terrible advice as well, but I just dismiss it immediately. You know, I'm always like, I'm not doing that. You know what I mean?
oh, that's good.
In my
Yeah,
own mind.
that's
Like,
my mindset too. It's probably why I
Yeah.
can't remember it. I'm just like, you're
Yes.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
I'm not listening to you.
I don't know. There's lots of fools out there who offer advice.
Well, I think people have different opinions about things, right? So, like, I'm just thinking about dating and everything, and some of the advice. I'm not going to go into details, but some of the advice.
Our listeners want to know.
No, you know,
Sorry.
People crowd for details, right?
no, I mean,
Juicy story.
just like playing the game. Everyone has a different style, you know, to how they date, and I just,
Do you guys get a lot of dating advice? I mean, all three of you are single, so
yeah,
do you get a lot of dating advice?
yeah.
Well, I think
Different
for
people.
at least women, there's like, oftentimes as things develop, right, you'll share kind of where things have gone, and then you're maybe trying to figure out where they're going to go. So you talk to one friend and they think this. You talk to another friend, they think you should do this, or he doesn't think this, or he does think this, right? It's like, it's very common. And I don't know, I actually tend to find myself that kind of like Diane was saying, I think people come to me with their situations often. And I think I'm a good kind of sounding board because I'm a logically oriented person. I think some people are emotionally oriented. So they respond and react differently. I'm more of an even keel kind of a person. And so I try to ground things, I guess, is what I would say. And with the whole dating thing, I'm a very like no games kind of a thing. Like
So-
be authentic. Don't wait to respond. You know, just like be your true self.
So, pointed question for you, for both of you ladies, and maybe for Joe too. Joe's shaking his head no. But particularly, like, if you have questions about dating, would you go to a friend of the opposite gender? Like, would you go to a guy and just ask him about, I've got this relationship with this guy. Tell me, like, how guys think, or
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would
Would
go
you?
to my brother about that
okay.
thing. Yeah.
Is this arrogant? I think I know how guys think. So I don't.
Guys don't even
I
know
don't really
how guys think.
feel like
Yeah.
What are the guys you do?
I would agree with Joe.
Guys are very
They're
simple.
It's a mystery to me.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Very
saying. I'm like, they're
simple.
simple. It is not hard to figure out. But I would definitely help a guy who came to me.
Because I would sometimes like maybe talk to my mom when I was in high school, be like, "Mom, why is this girl being weird?" She's like, "Because she's a girl."
I think it's helpful.
Yeah, it's funny because you turn to for different people for advice. Like, is there one person in your life that you kind of turn to for advice more than anyone else?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Like your parents or siblings or friends or
There's a priest in the diocese who I trust, but I'm not so friendly with that I think it would necessarily make him change the advice he'd give me. You know, because
like spiritual director.
yeah, well, not formally, but I mean like I've known you for 10 years, and I mean I consider you a friend. I also trust your judgment, but I mean I think that can
I'm
sometimes-
biased.
Yeah, 'cause sometimes muddy the waters a bit. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely with a few of my parents, certainly for like life things, career things, a couple priests, Father Connaughton, spiritual things, Father Andy, my spiritual director. And then with Ultimate, there's two guys who are like a little bit older than me, like about 10 years that played before me. And so I constantly was getting advice from them.
Were they like playing with the pie plates?
No,
Oh no, not that much older than you.
old.
Okay.
But they had, accomplished kind of what I was seeking.
Oh,
And
cool.
they could be a good guide and,
Yeah, because I think we need these wise people in our life, whoever they are.
Yeah, definitely.
And I love those kinds of conversations, sharing like what your current situation is, your experience, or like, something I don't get, and you talk to someone else, and it's like, oh, it just clarifies things, gives you a new direction.
Yeah. There are very few people in my life that I found who, very few priests, I should say, who I think most people in general like to talk about themselves a lot. Not a lot of people like to listen, and not a lot of people like to ask the other person about their life. So the few people that I have that are like, so tell me how you're doing. Because as a priest, I hear how everyone else is doing, but the people that like sit down like, oh, just tell me how you're doing. They're the ones I'm like, all right, I need your advice on this and that. And what a gift that is, to be able to give to someone, just to be able to listen to them. Because I think people, as you guys both said, Diane and Lauren, people come to you for advice. So that's a high honor that they trust you. So thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Restless. Go seek out wisdom. Seek out wise friends. Sometimes the friends could be the saints and some of those who've gone before us. And seek out the greatest wisdom. Be humble enough to take that advice and really kind of shape your life according to the wisdom that you've received. You can find us on Veritas Catholic Radio, 1350 AM. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts and wherever else you get your podcasts. restlesscatholicmedia.podbean.com.
Or YouTube.
And also
Check out the video series.
we do have a Restless video series. If you haven't tuned in, please check it out. And also we're on Instagram, I think, right?
Yes.
I don't have Instagram, sorry.
At Restless Catholic Media.
Stay tuned. Tune in next time.